Everyone tells you to fight for what you want. But what if fighting is exactly why you're losing? What if your biggest mistake isn't giving up too easily, but refusing to give up at all? Right now, someone in your life is completely ignoring your voice, dismissing your ideas, and taking your presence for granted because you've never given them a reason to do anything else. They know you'll always be there tomorrow, so they don't need to appreciate you today. They know you'll keep talking, so they don't need to listen. They know you'll never leave, so they don't need to value what you bring. The uncomfortable truth is that your loyalty has become your weakness, your dedication has become your downfall, and your refusal to walk away has guaranteed that nobody will ever chase you. Your voice echoes in empty boardrooms while brilliant ideas fall on deaf ears. You pour your heart into relationships that drain your soul. You give your best to people who barely acknowledge your existence. Sound familiar? Tonight, I want to share with you a truth that will change how you see yourself and how others see you forever. Rebecca Martinez sat in that glass conference room for the third time that month, watching her revolutionary marketing strategy get dismissed by executives who wouldn't know innovation if it handed them a business card. She had spent countless hours researching consumer behavior, analyzing market trends, creating presentations that could transform their struggling company. But every time she opened her mouth, the room seemed to collectively yawn. They would nod politely, thank her for her input, then proceed to implement watered-down versions of strategies that had failed other companies years ago. For months, Rebecca played the game. She spoke louder, prepared better presentations, sent follow-up emails with additional research. She thought the problem was her delivery, her credentials, her approach. She worked overtime, perfecting her pitch, believing that if she just tried harder, they would finally hear her. But the pattern never changed. Her voice had become background noise in a room full of people who had stopped listening before she even began speaking. Then something happened that changed everything. Rebecca got sick. Not seriously ill, but enough to keep her away from meetings for 2 weeks. She didn't send emails, didn't call in with updates, didn't try to participate remotely. She simply disappeared from their professional landscape. And in that absence, something remarkable occurred. The marketing campaign they had chosen over her strategy failed spectacularly. Customer complaints flooded in. Sales dropped 20% in 10 days suddenly. The same executives who had dismissed her ideas were asking, "Where's Rebecca? What would she have done differently? Can someone get her on the phone?" Her silence had accomplished what months of speaking never could. Her absence made them realize what her presence had provided. When Rebecca returned, she walked into that same conference room with a different energy. She didn't rush to fill the silence with explanations or apologies for being away. She didn't immediately offer solutions to their crisis. She simply sat quietly and waited. For the first time in her career at that company, they asked her opinion before she offered it. They listened when she spoke. They implemented her strategy without modification. Her temporary withdrawal had reset the entire dynamic of how they perceived her value. This is the principle that most people never understand. Your constant availability doesn't increase your value, it diminishes it. When you're always there, always speaking, always offering your wisdom to ears that refuse to hear. You train people to take you for granted. They assume your voice will always be there tomorrow. So they don't need to listen today. They know you'll always be available. So they don't need to prioritize your time. They expect you'll always give. So they never feel grateful for what they receive. But absence creates a vacuum. When you step away, you leave behind an empty space that forces people to confront what they've lost. Suddenly, the voice they ignored becomes the voice they're desperately trying to hear. The presence they took for granted becomes the presence they're scrambling to recover. The value they couldn't see becomes glaringly obvious in its absence. This isn't about manipulation or playing games with people's emotions. This is about understanding a fundamental truth of human psychology that governs every relationship, every workplace, every social dynamic you'll ever encounter. People don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. They don't listen to voices that are always speaking. They don't value presence that never withdraws. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. Are they the ones who are constantly available, always talking, perpetually offering their opinions? Or are they the ones who speak with measured words, show up with intention, and know when to step back? The most influential people in any room are often those who understand the power of strategic silence, the strength found in selective availability, the authority that comes from knowing your worth. Your worth isn't determined by how much you give or how often you speak. Your worth is inherent, but your perceived value in the eyes of others is directly related to how you present yourself to the world. When you make yourself constantly available, you send a message that your time has no boundaries. When you always respond immediately, you suggest that you have nothing more important to do. When you never walk away, you imply that you have nowhere else to go. The truth is, they won't listen to you until you walk away first, because walking away demonstrates something that words alone never can. It shows that you value yourself enough to remove yourself from situations that don't honor your worth. It proves that you have options, standards, boundaries. It communicates that your presence is a gift, not a given right. But here's what's crucial to understand. Walking away isn't about punishment or revenge. It's not about making others suffer for their lack of appreciation. It's about creating space for authentic recognition to grow. It's about stepping back so that both you and they can see the relationship clearly. It's about establishing the foundation for genuine respect rather than assumed availability. When you understand this principle, everything changes. You stop chasing people who don't value your presence. You stop speaking to ears that refuse to hear. You stop giving your energy to those who drain it without gratitude. Instead, you learn to create space, to be selective with your availability, to let your absence speak the words your presence couldn't communicate. This is your invitation to step into a new understanding of your own power. Marcus Thompson learned this lesson the hard way. For 5 years, he was the guy everyone called when systems crashed at midnight. He was the developer who stayed until 9 o'clock fixing problems that weren't even his responsibility. When colleagues needed help with projects, Marcus was always there. When deadlines seemed impossible, Marcus made them possible by sacrificing his weekends, his sleep, his personal life. He thought his dedication would be rewarded. He believed his availability would be appreciated. He assumed his sacrifice would be recognized. Instead, he became invisible through his own indispensability. Management took his overtime for granted. Colleagues dumped their problems on him because they knew he wouldn't say no. His salary remained stagnant while others got promotions. His ideas were implemented without credit because everyone assumed Marcus would always be there to make them work anyway. He had become the human equivalent of office furniture. Essential but unnoticed, valuable but unappreciated. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when Marcus collapsed at his desk. Exhaustion, stress, and years of neglecting his health had finally caught up with him. The doctor ordered complete rest for 6 weeks. No work, no emails, no phone calls. For the first time in 5 years, Marcus was forced to become unavailable. Within 3 days, the company's main server went down. Within a week, 2 major projects had stalled because nobody else understood the systems Marcus had built. Within 2 weeks, the CEO was personally calling Marcus's doctor asking when he would return. The same management team that had overlooked him for years suddenly realized that their entire operation revolved around a man they had never properly valued. When Marcus finally returned, he didn't rush back into his old patterns. He had learned something profound during those weeks of forced absence. He set office hours and stuck to them. He stopped answering emails after 6 o'clock. He delegated responsibilities he had been hoarding. And something amazing happened. Instead of being fired for setting boundaries, he was promoted Instead of being punished for becoming less available, he was rewarded with a 40% salary increase and a team to manage. This reveals something fundamental about how humans assign value. We don't value what's abundant, we value what's scarce. We don't appreciate what's always available, we treasure what's limited. When you make yourself constantly accessible, you inadvertently communicate that your time, your energy, your presence has unlimited supply. And anything with unlimited supply has no perceived value. Think about the most expensive restaurants in your city. Do they stay open 24 hours? No. They have limited hours, limited seating, limited availability. The exclusivity creates demand, the scarcity generates value. Now think about fast food restaurants. Always open, always available, always there when you need them. Which one commands more respect? Which one charges higher prices? Which one do people value more? Your availability works the same way. When you're always there, always ready to help, always willing to drop everything for others, you train them to see you as a convenience rather than a person. You become the human equivalent of a 24-hour service station. Useful but not valuable. Accessible but not appreciated. But here's what most people misunderstand about this principle. The goal isn't to become unavailable to everyone all the time. The goal is to become selectively available to the right people at the right times. It's about creating healthy boundaries that protect your energy while still allowing you to contribute meaningfully to the world. The difference between Marcus before and after his forced absence wasn't that he stopped caring or helping others. It was that he learned to help from a position of strength rather than desperation. He offered his skills as gifts rather than obligations. He made his time available as a choice rather than an expectation. When you understand this psychology, you stop burning yourself out trying to prove your worth through constant availability. You realize that respect isn't earned through exhaustion. Value isn't demonstrated through sacrifice without boundaries. Worth isn't proven through giving until you have nothing left instead. You learn to show up powerfully when you do show up. You speak with authority when you do speak. You give generously when you do give. But you give from abundance rather than desperation. You offer your presence as a gift rather than a guarantee. This shift in mindset changes everything. People start listening when you speak because they know your words are carefully chosen rather than constantly flowing. They value your presence because they understand it's not guaranteed. They respect your time because they realize it's limited and precious. The psychology of value recognition is simple but profound. Scarcity creates demand. Boundaries generate respect. Strategic withdrawal establishes authority. When you learn to walk away first, you're not abandoning relationships. You're creating the space for them to flourish on healthier terms. Elena Rodriguez understood this truth through necessity rather than choice. For 23 years, she had been the family anchor. When her brother needed money, Elena provided it. When her sister needed childcare, Elena rearranged her schedule. When her elderly mother needed medical appointments, Elena took time off work. When cousins needed help moving, planning weddings, or dealing with crises, Elena was always the first person they called and the last person they thanked. Elena's own dreams sat on the back burner while she managed everyone else's emergencies. Her business idea remained a file on her computer while she solved other people's problems. Her health deteriorated as she carried stress that wasn't even hers to bear. She had become the family's emergency contact, unpaid therapist, and financial safety net, all rolled into one exhausted human being. The wake-up call came during a routine checkup when her doctor discovered dangerously high blood pressure and stress symptoms that could have killed her. The physician was clear: reduce stress immediately or face serious health consequences. Elena realized she had been so busy taking care of everyone else that she had forgotten to take care of herself. For the first time in her adult life, Elena said no. When her brother called asking for another loan, she declined. When family members expected her to coordinate holiday gatherings, she stepped back. When relatives assumed she would handle elderly care responsibilities alone, She refused to carry the burden without support. She stopped answering every phone call immediately. She stopped dropping everything to solve other people's problems. The initial reaction was predictable. Family members accused her of being selfish. They questioned what had changed. They expressed disappointment that she wasn't the same reliable Elena they had always known. But Elena held firm. Her health, her peace of mind, and her own life goals mattered too. Something remarkable happened over the following months. The same family members who had taken her for granted began to appreciate what she had been providing. Her brother found ways to manage his finances instead of relying on her as a permanent solution. Her sister made childcare arrangements that didn't revolve around Elena's availability. Other relatives stepped up to help with their mother's care. The family dynamics shifted from Elena carrying everything to everyone contributing something. But more importantly, Elena reclaimed her own life. She launched the consulting business she had dreamed about for years. She prioritized her health and watched her blood pressure return to normal ranges. She formed new friendships with people who valued her for who she was, not just what she could provide. She learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was essential for sustainable relationships. This is the power of strategic withdrawal. When you stop being everyone's solution, they're forced to develop their own problem-solving skills. When you stop being constantly available, people learn to value the time you do make available. When you stop saying yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningful again. Setting boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about creating healthy spaces where genuine relationships can grow. It's not about punishing others for their past behavior. It's about establishing new patterns for future interactions. It's not about becoming unavailable to everyone. It's about becoming intentionally available to those who demonstrate respect for your time, energy, and well-being. The respect equation is straightforward. How you treat yourself sets the standard for how others treat you. When you respect your own time, others learn to respect it too. When you value your own energy, others begin to see its worth. When you honor your own boundaries, others learn to honor them as well. Walking away first isn't about abandoning people you care about. It's about stepping back far enough to see the relationship clearly and making conscious choices about how you want to engage moving forward. But here's where many people make a critical mistake. They confuse strategic withdrawal with emotional revenge. They walk away in anger, hoping to hurt those who've hurt them. They disappear to prove a point rather than to create positive change. They use absence as a weapon instead of a tool for transformation. This approach fails because it's rooted in the wrong motivation and produces the wrong results. True strategic withdrawal isn't about punishment. It's about preservation. It's not about making others pay for their mistakes. It's about protecting your own well-being while creating space for healthier dynamics to emerge. When you walk away in anger, you're still emotionally attached to the very situation you're trying to escape. When you walk away with wisdom, you're creating the emotional distance necessary for genuine healing and growth. The difference lies in your internal state when you make the decision to step back. Are you walking away to get revenge, or are you walking away to get restored? Are you leaving to hurt them, or are you leaving to heal yourself? Are you disappearing to prove they were wrong, or are you creating space to prove you deserve better? Your motivation determines whether your absence becomes a destructive force or a constructive opportunity when you return after strategic withdrawal. You don't come back as the same person who left. You return with enhanced clarity about your worth, strengthened boundaries around your energy, and renewed confidence in your ability to choose how you engage with others. You're not seeking permission to be valued. You're demonstrating through your actions that you already value yourself. This return must be intentional and measured. You don't rush back into old patterns just because people start showing you the respect you always deserved. You carefully evaluate whether their changed behavior represents genuine growth or temporary adjustment designed to pull you back into familiar dysfunction. You look for consistent actions over time. not just immediate reactions to your absence. The comeback framework requires patience and wisdom. You test new boundaries gradually, observing how others respond when you maintain your standards. You notice whether people respect your limits when it's inconvenient for them, not just when it's easy. You pay attention to whether they value your presence when you're not solving their problems, not just when you're useful to their agenda. Creating sustainable relationship dynamics means establishing patterns that can be maintained long-term without burning you out or building up resentment in others. It means finding the balance between being helpful and being taken advantage of, between being available and being accessible, between being generous and being depleted. This balance looks different for everyone because your capacities, circumstances, and relationships are unique to your life. What matters is that you create systems that honor both your need to contribute meaningfully to others and your need to maintain your own emotional, physical, and spiritual health. You learn to give from overflow rather than emptiness, to help from strength rather than weakness, to love from wholeness rather than neediness. The goal isn't to become someone who never helps others or never makes sacrifices for people you care about. The goal is to become someone who helps and sacrifices from a position of choice rather than obligation, strength rather than desperation, abundance rather than depletion. When you operate from this foundation, your contributions become more valuable, your relationships become more authentic, and your impact becomes more sustainable. Let me share with you one final story that brings all these principles together. David Chen was a talented architect who had spent 15 years building what everyone considered a successful career. He designed beautiful buildings, managed large projects, and had developed a reputation for solving impossible construction challenges. But despite his professional success, David felt invisible in his own life. At work, his innovative designs were consistently modified by committees who didn't understand his vision. Clients would hire him for his expertise, then ignore his recommendations in favor of cheaper alternatives that compromised the integrity of his work. His business partners made decisions without consulting him, even though his name was on the company letterhead. At home, his wife made major family decisions without his input, assuming he was too busy with work to care about household matters. His teenage children treated him like a walking wallet, acknowledging his existence only when they needed money or transportation. David had become successful by other people's standards while feeling completely powerless in his own existence. He provided financial security but had no emotional influence. He solved professional problems but couldn't address personal dissatisfaction. He was present in every situation but absent from every decision that mattered to him. The transformation began during a particularly frustrating week when 3 different situations collided. His business partners announced they had signed a contract for a project he fundamentally disagreed with. Using his reputation to secure the deal without his knowledge, his wife informed him that she had enrolled their son in an expensive private school and committed to volunteer obligations that would require David to adjust his schedule, all without discussing it with him first. His daughter announced she was planning a graduation party at their house for 50 people, assuming he would pay for everything and clean up afterward. In each situation, David felt the familiar surge of frustration, followed by the automatic resignation that had characterized his responses for years. But something was different this time. Instead of protesting, explaining why these decisions were problematic, or trying to negotiate better outcomes, David made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. He said nothing. He simply walked away. At work, instead of arguing about the problematic contract, David quietly began exploring opportunities with other firms. He didn't announce his intentions or threaten to leave. He simply started having conversations with architects whose values aligned with his own vision. At home, instead of complaining about decisions made without his input, David began making his own decisions without seeking approval from others. He enrolled in a photography course he had always wanted to take. He planned a solo hiking trip for the weekend of his daughter's party. He opened his own bank account. and began setting aside money for projects that mattered to him. His absence from familiar patterns created immediate confusion. His business partners suddenly needed his input on technical challenges they couldn't solve without him. They began scheduling meetings specifically to get his opinion on design decisions they had previously made without consultation. His wife started asking about his thoughts on family matters when she realized he was no longer automatically available to implement her plans. His children began actually listening when he spoke because his words had become more selective and intentional. But the most significant change was internal. David stopped seeking permission to value his own judgment. He stopped apologizing for having standards. He stopped explaining why his time, expertise, and perspective deserved consideration. Instead, he began demonstrating these truths through his actions. When his business partners offered him a genuine partnership with equal decision-making authority, David was ready to return to collaborative work because the terms had fundamentally changed. When his wife suggested they establish a system for making family decisions together, David was willing to engage because the dynamic had shifted from assumption to respect. When his children asked for his advice instead of just his money, David was available to provide guidance because they were finally ready to receive it. The hiking trip David took became a turning point that extended far beyond a weekend in the mountains. As he sat by a campfire on his first night alone in years, David realized he had spent decades trying to earn respect through accommodation rather than commanding respect through authenticity. He had been so focused on proving his worth to others that he had forgotten to value himself. He had been so busy being who others needed him to be that he had lost touch with who he actually was. This is the ultimate truth about walking away first. It's not really about getting others to listen to you. It's about learning to listen to yourself. It's not about forcing others to value your presence. It's about discovering your own worth independent of their recognition. It's not about changing how others treat you. It's about changing how you treat yourself. When you walk away first, you step into your own power. You stop waiting for permission to live authentically. You stop seeking approval for your standards. You stop apologizing for taking up space in your own life. You begin to understand that your worth isn't determined by how others respond to you. It's determined by how you respond to yourself. The people who are meant to be in your life will rise to meet your standards. The relationships that are built on mutual respect will flourish when you establish healthy boundaries. The opportunities that align with your values will become available when you stop accepting situations that compromise your integrity. But some people won't make the adjustment. Some relationships won't survive your decision to value yourself. Some opportunities will disappear when you refuse to settle for less than you deserve. This is not a failure of the principle. This is the principle working exactly as it should. You're not trying to control how others respond to your boundaries. You're creating space for authentic connections to develop while allowing inauthentic ones to naturally fall away. Your life is not a rehearsal. Every day you spend accommodating people who don't respect you is a day you can't spend building relationships with people who do. Every moment you waste trying to convince others of your value is a moment you could spend developing that value. Every breath you use explaining why you deserve better treatment is a breath you could use creating the life that reflects your true worth. They won't listen to you until you walk away first. Because walking away is the strongest statement you can make about who you are and what you will accept. It's your declaration of independence from the need for external validation. It's your commitment to honor yourself even when others won't. It's your decision to live authentically rather than conveniently. So walk away. Not in anger, but in love for yourself. Not to punish others, but to protect your own spirit. Not to prove a point, but to live your truth. Walk away knowing that those who are meant to follow will catch up. Walk away trusting that those who don't follow weren't meant for your journey anyway. Walk away with the confidence that comes from finally understanding your own worth. Your voice matters, your presence is valuable, your standards are valid, and they will listen. Once you teach them how to hear you by first learning to honor yourself,